what I am going to talk uh, is uh, is slightly a tracing backward about what has happened over the last 2 3 centuries, which is responsible for the today's melodies and today's ecological crisis. So my topic is man-planet relationship. So what has gone wrong with the man-planet relationship over 2 to 3 centuries? So briefly, I would like to focus upon three major points. So I take only 15 to 18 minutes, not more than that. The first point is that where actually we went wrong. I think Professor Atri has rightly brought out the today's scenario, how miserable it is for all of us to live on this planet. So he's with rich data. He gave a very vivid picture about the scenario around, especially against the backdrop of this pandemic. So I just trace back to the what has actually gone wrong in the onset of human civilization. If we look into the literature, we see that 16th and 17th century enlightenment, that we call it as an European enlightenment, which gave a tectonic shift to the civilization. It was in fact a revolution in science because during that time many inventions came up and people developed a scientific perspective about themselves and also about the nature. So I see a point of departure during the European Enlightenment, which today we are experiencing. There is something wrong when we set our path of development in 17th century. It is, even though it revolutionized the science, it also provided a different kind of a new rationality to human thinking. It did a lot of damage also because most of the models of development we see, they are Eurocentric and they came from European scholars. So what actually the core part of our the presentation is that the Enlightenment period, which defined science, while defining science, it brought out the subject and the object as a dichotomous entities. I see there is a problem with this premise because we are looking at the scientific inquiry as the subject and the object dichotomy. So here subject means the scientist and the object means the nature around us. So this 18th century, 17th century enlightenment, it broke our cordial relationship with this nature because we developed a notion that whatever the naturally available around us is for the discretion of the mankind. It is for the utility of the man. If the natural resources are not touched by man, then it is a wastage. So the value of nature is attributable only by its utilitarian value. Otherwise, it is useless. This is the kind of notion we began after the 17th century enlightenment. So this kind of a attitude towards nature, it gave us a kind of an instrumental value to the nature. So nature is for exploitation, nature is for man's use. So that is how an anthropocentric perspective we developed after this 17th century. Means man is supreme, and whatever that is available around, it is for his welfare and it is for his utility. So this is the notion actually where we have to challenge in the context of this World Environment Day, and also especially the post-pandemic and the during pandemic scenario. We have to focus on this because we lost the very relationship with the nature from this kind of a scientific perspective. So the approaches towards the natural world gave rise to a different kind of a development model because the economic development that took place after 17th century enlightenment, I think our predecessor has given a passing reference to some of these processes. The very premise of economic development we began in some century, 1 or 2 centuries ago, was that exploitation of natural resources. I want to put this exploitation of natural resources in the literature of economic development within quotes and unquotes. because we started looking at nature as something left for exploitation. This word itself is a derogatory if we look back to what we have done in the past centuries. So most of our development planning, especially given by Keynes, the famous economist, they started conceiving that the most of the problems of development are due to the incapacity to utilize the natural resources. So therefore, if there is a country backward like Asian countries, African countries, why they are backward? Because they are not able to exploit the natural resources available to them. There is no capacity to exploit. There are no technologies available, and that is how we have to empower them with the new technology so that they can exploit nature more and more and become rich. That was the kind of economic models we have begun 2 centuries ago. The notion of the prominent place in elementary economic development, if you look back to the elementary economics of 10th standard and 12th standard, where there is a term development and backwardness, you will certainly see the exploitation of natural resource is the cause for underdevelopment. So that kind of a notion we have to change in the present context. Then what we fail to recognize some 3 centuries ago is that natural resource is like a capital. What we really committed a blunder is that we should have treated the natural resource as a capital, not as a income. So we, instead of keeping that as a capital and developing that capital, we started deriving the income from the natural resources. So therefore, it started depleting, because if you consider capital as the income, then your capital will not remain with you for a very long time. It goes on depleting. So that is what is happening. We are in fact eating away the capital, confusing that capital is the income. So this is the fundamental the differentiation we have to make today. The second point is about the onset of a capitalist development. So we see how the capitalism started advancing after the European Enlightenment, science and technology, and so many innovations came out from the European model. So the multinational companies, they started indulging in the mass production technologies. Look at this, is another serious threat to the mankind on this planet, because the mass production technologies always deteriorated the natural resource base. So now we are indulging in mass production. Everything is mass production. So that is how the pressure is put on the natural resource base. After exploiting resources on the land, now we are seeing many multinationals, now they are talking of oceaning the seabeds. I mean, mining the ocean beds for minerals and other wealthy, the raw material. So if this is the kind of development we are acknowledging and endorsing. Now the resources are depleting on the land. Now they are looking into the oceans to exploit resources. If this is the kind of the development, if every one of us are acknowledging, then as Stephen Hawking once said, if this is the present, the state of consumption levels are maintained for coming years, even if there are three the planets like Earth, we cannot meet demand for our for our requirement, because it is such a overtasking situation for the planet Earth. So if this goes, we have to look for resources in some other planet. This is what Stephen Hawking once telling. So coming to the recent developments, now we have what is called as a green capitalism. I think some of the initiatives that Dr. Atri he pointed out in his presentation, a green capitalism. So once capitalism enters, I think the sustainability question takes a sideline, because capitalism and sustainability, they cannot go together, because capitalism thrives on making profit, unlimited profit. So therefore, now there are solar panels, and people are taking off substituting the batteries in place of petrol and diesel, because that is producing a lot of pollution. So therefore, they want to bring battery operated automobiles to cities, and all over they want to introduce battery operated vehicles. I think if this is the kind of, again, even though we consider that solar is a eco-friendly and battery is a battery operated vehicles are eco-friendly, what happens when it is produced on mass scale? So there are studies on warning us, if we go on installing solar panels in miles and miles together, please think over after 10 years or 15 years, if they become defunct, where this garbage will be dumped. They use a lot of heavy metals, and that heavy metal is so polluting to the environment, so dangerous to the mankind. So can we go on producing these solar panels, batteries on a mass scale? What will be its consequences? Can it be a sustainable alternative for us? According to me, whatever that is produced at a mass level may not be sustainable for a very long time. So coming to the early 70s, I think this kind of a trend was warned to given warning bell by many philosophers. In this context, I quote one E.F. Schumacher, a British philosopher who wrote a very famous book called Small is Beautiful. So in this book, he had very clearly, made a point that any mass production technology is not sustainable for a long time. So therefore, what we need is an appropriate technology. So where our consumption levels are properly defined. So if everything becomes an essential need, then I think to meet those essential needs, it is very difficult for the available resources with which we can, make our living standards appropriately uh, sustainable. So coming to the last point, so that is what I was given in my title. That's about the wisdom of the East. So what wisdom people have to think, because what we are indoctrinated the models of development, they are all Eurocentric and West-centric. So earlier, to if you go back some 50 years back, our situation was very very eco-friendly. Even though probably half all right, we had some problems like food production and other kinds of things. But the quality of environment 50 years ago, what we are finding today, there is a lot of difference. So we were better off in terms of quality of environment 50 years ago than. So now we are talking about what kind of a approach we should have had towards the science. So the countering this subject-object dichotomy given to us by the European Enlightenment, our Eastern philosophies, they always advocated subject and object, they are not dichotomous, they are interdependent, they are harmonious to one another. So in fact, there is a subject in the object and there is an object in the subject, because if you look at human body as the subject, so there are so many objects within that. So this kind of a view may give us a compassionate attitude, a compassionate value towards nature. So this is missing in the European Enlightenment, the science and also the scientific premises. Now, I think from the East, we have one classic example that is called as the gross GDH, gross domestic happiness. In fact, the Western models, they measure development in terms of gross domestic product, which is a materialist calculation of the standards of development. Now the Bhutan, which is an Eastern society, which is an excellent model which gave us a very alternative way of looking at development. They came out with a new kind of a parameters to measure development. So that is called as gross domestic happiness. How much happy we are. So certainly, I feel this is a something we have to review. Where I mean our the past deeds, the path we took, the civilizational path we adopted in the early post enlightenment period and up to now. So I think some of these models developed by Bhutan are very very relevant for today. So some of these points I thought I should share with you. So the where we actually went wrong is about our notion of the science itself. scientific perspective itself and the perspective with which we are, addressing the natural resources. This has more than 3 centuries history. So now I think we are under the influence of the pandemic. Life has become insecure, uncertainties all over, and this is an appropriate time for us to introspect where we have gone wrong and set our mindsets, attitudes, beliefs, and appropriate institutions in society where we respect the natural resources and we are the extension of the natural resources. If we look from the amoeba to the human beings, it is the natural environment which gave us an appropriate, the space for us to take birth and evolve up to this extent. So we forgot the very basic elements of nature through which our all body constituents are made up of, and now we are, consumer centric. So we are now becoming a consumerist society, and to satisfy our appetite, I think, as Stephen Hawking said, even another 3 Earth-like planets, if you provide, I think human, needs and wants cannot be satisfied. So this is where actually some intervention, rethinking, some de-learning and relearning has to take place. This is what I should share on this occasion. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to share my views with the august audience. Thank you so much.